What is your departed loved one's soul doing right now, in heaven this very instant? While you're reading this, while you're breathing, while the clock keeps ticking, is he watching you? Does he see you cry? Is he still himself? The way he used to laugh, the way he'd look at you over his shoulder? Or has he become something else entirely, something you wouldn't even recognize anymore? July 3rd is right around the corner, the day the church honors the one apostle who touched the glorified body of the risen Christ with his own finger. So St. Thomas the apostle is about to show you 8 things your loved one is doing right now in glory. And there's a 9th, the last one, that no one has ever told you. And here's the question you'll finally be able to answer by the end. The one that's been burning inside you for months. The one you've never had the courage to say out loud in front of anyone. When he arrived in heaven, did he remember you? Was your name written in the air before the face of God? The very first thing he asked for before anything else. Before we go on, do me a favor. Right now in the comments, write your departed loved one's first name, just the first name, nothing else. That small act, done in sincere faith, places them under St. Thomas's direct gaze before July 3rd arrives. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell right now, because what's coming was prepared quietly over many weeks and set aside for one specific person. And that person, the one your loved one is already watching over from heaven, is you. Picture the room, locked from the inside. Jerusalem, the year 33, 8 days after Resurrection Sunday. The door of the upper room is bolted shut with heavy iron because the temple authorities are still hunting down the followers of the Galilean who was crucified the Friday before. The air smells of burnt lamp oil, of sweat, of the dust of Jerusalem seeping in through the cracks. Inside, 11 men sit against the walls, breathing low, staring at the floor. Among them is one who arrived late, one who'd been absent from this very room the previous Sunday, the exact moment everyone else received their first sight of the risen Lord. That man's name is Thomas. And for 8 straight days he's been carrying a weight in his chest that feels like fury, feels like shame, and feels like something even deeper that he can't quite name. He hasn't slept. He's barely eaten. He's been pacing the alleys of Jerusalem, turning the others' words over and over in his head until they stopped meaning anything at all. The others had told him, 10 voices at once talking over each other, "We have seen the Lord." And Thomas had answered with the line the church would repeat for 2,000 years afterward, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." It's right there in John chapter 20, verse 25. A hard line. The line of a man who's simply done with promises. A line that a devout Catholic in the 21st century, sitting in front of his mother's grave or his wife's, says over and over without even realizing it. And then it happens. The doors are still locked, and suddenly Christ is standing there, in the middle of the room. Nothing pushed open, no bolt giving way, no sound at all. "Peace be with you," he says. And he looks straight at Thomas. He calls him by name. He repeats, word for word, exactly what Thomas had said 8 days earlier when he wasn't even there to hear it. "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Stop for a second, because this next part matters." The risen Christ, glorified, his body now free of the ordinary laws of matter, still carries the 5 open wounds. The wounds are still there, the pierced palms, the marked feet, the side opened by the centurion Longinus's spear, which the Gospel of John describes in chapter 19, verse 34, with a detail no invented story would ever include. Blood and water flowed out. Thomas knows this. He was there that Friday, or close enough to have heard the whole account. And now the Master's body is standing in front of him, alive, breathing, those same wounds turned into light. And Thomas, instead of pulling back, does exactly what the Lord asks. He puts his finger into the palms. He puts his whole hand into the side, and he feels the warm, open flesh of the risen one under his own fingers. That gesture of St. Thomas's is the exact picture of your loved one's very first moment in heaven. St. Teresa of Jesus understood this perfectly. In the book of her life, chapter 29, she describes a vision in which the Lord showed her the wound in his side with such clarity that she herself wrote, in her own documented words, that the sight alone was enough to understand every mystery of heaven. She describes it as a brief flash, almost instantaneous, in which the risen Lord showed her his open hands and then his side, and it seemed to her that the entire universe fit inside that one wound. According to St. Teresa of Avila's teaching, the wound in Christ's side is the actual doorway through which the soul enters glory. The wound stays open after the resurrection because it serves an eternal purpose. It's the face by which God lets his own recognize him on the other shore. If your loved one died in a state of grace, this is exactly what they did the moment they arrived. The very first thing they saw, before the throne, before the angelic choirs broke into song, before the infinite light of the Trinity itself, was a wound, just one, the open side, and they went straight toward it. And just like St. Thomas, they reached out a spiritual hand and placed it inside that wound. And in that single gesture, they recognized everything they had only half believed on earth. Every prayer said on their knees without real certainty. Everything they had held on to through years of exhaustion. Inside that open, luminous flesh was the answer to every doubt your loved one ever carried but never said out loud. The apostle rose from that gesture and said 4 words. Just 4. We'll say them together in a moment, because they're the second thing your loved one is doing in heaven right now, and they deserve their own space. But first, a question for you. What happens to a soul that doubted a great deal in life? The soul that went to confession 5 times and then quietly stopped going. The soul that said the rosary out of habit, feeling nothing. The soul that stood in front of its own father's casket, silently wondering whether anyone was really on the other side listening. What happens to a soul like that? Is that first entrance through the wound denied to them? The answer is the exact opposite of what you'd expect. And it has everything to do with a single word Christ said to Thomas in that upper room. A word that appears in John 20:28. A word that changes the destiny forever of any soul who ever doubted on earth. Let's go straight to it. My Lord and my God. 4 words. 3 nouns and a double possessive. It fits in the palm of a hand. It fits in the space of a single sigh. It fits in the last breath of an old man who can no longer speak above a whisper, but whose lips still move. It's the shortest confession of faith in the history of Christianity, and the most loaded with meaning. And it was spoken by a man who, 8 days earlier, had sworn he wouldn't believe until his own hand was inside a wound. St. Teresa of Jesus knew this line well. She quotes it in The Way of Perfection, chapter 25, when she writes about how the soul speaks to God in interior prayer, without long speeches, without rhetoric, without the polished flourishes learned from books. She names Thomas explicitly as the example, writing in her own documented words that this brief confession carried more weight before the Father than any elaborate prayer composed by theologians, because it came straight from the apostle's own wound, from his freshly forgiven shame, from his understanding newly opened to the mystery. According to St. Teresa of Avila's teaching, the highest prayer is the one that rises straight from the center of the soul, bypassing the filter of the intellect entirely. And Thomas's confession was a full prayer, standing complete, contained within the apostle's own chest, with no need to be spoken, allowed to be understood. Pause right here, because what I just explained is the second concrete thing your loved one is doing in heaven. On earth, your loved one prayed countless times, some days with real devotion. other days with their mind somewhere else entirely. Other days just moving their lips because it was Sunday and that's what you did. But now, in heaven, their soul speaks that same confession of Thomas's in a way we can't fully imagine here. They speak it with the whole of their being, no interruptions, no distractions. No need to repeat it because it's already inside them the way breathing is. Saint Teresa of Jesus describes this state of the blessed soul in the Seventh Mansions, chapter 2. She calls it spiritual marriage, and she says something beautiful, that the soul fully united with God no longer prays with words. It prays by simply existing. Its very existence becomes the phrase, "My Lord and my God," repeated without ceasing, like a pulse beating in a sleeping chest that the sleeper never even notices. Sit with that for a moment. Your loved one right now while you're reading this is speaking, with the full weight of their entire being. The same confession Thomas spoke just once in that upper room. And every time they speak it, it's fuller than the last, because each time they see more deeply who it is they're speaking to. It's a confession that expands inward, like a ripple in water that, instead of fading out, keeps growing. And here's something you may never have heard before. When Thomas said, "My Lord and my God," he spoke two truths at once. Lord, an acknowledgement of the Messiah, the one who fulfills the prophecies the Son of Man Daniel had seen coming on the clouds. My God, an acknowledgement of full divinity. That second part is the decisive one, because no apostle before Thomas had ever called Christ God using those exact words. Peter had said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God," but calling him directly "my God" with a personal possessive, that was Thomas, for the first time in the history of the Church. It's recorded right there in John 20:28, and the Eastern liturgy, since as early as the 4th century, has considered this line the first complete profession of Christological faith in history. Thomas, the one who doubted, was the one who opened the mouth of all Christianity to confess the divinity of Christ. Do you understand what that means for your loved one's soul? If your loved one ever doubted even once on earth, they're closer to St. Thomas than you think. And because of that, in heaven, they're given the very same gift, to speak in full the confession they could barely stammer out on earth. Doubt doesn't disqualify a soul from glory. It's actually the opposite. Doubt that reconciles itself with faith becomes, in heaven, the highest possible confession. Because the soul that doubted and then believed knows the exact cost of every word it speaks. Saint Teresa of Jesus put this into an image worth remembering. In the book of her life, chapter 22, she says that a soul who has passed through darkness and then reached the light loves that light with an intensity that souls who were always certain never reach. She herself had lived through years of deep spiritual dryness before the great mystical favors she received, so she knew this from direct experience. Light is loved more by someone who has known the darkness that came before it, and the confession, "My Lord and my God," sounds louder coming from someone who spoke it after spending 8 days walking the streets of Jerusalem, convinced the whole thing had been a lie. Your loved one, right now, is speaking that confession exactly that way, with the weight of every doubt they ever had on earth now turned into certainty. With every prayer they said feeling nothing now transformed into proof. With every night they wondered if God was even listening now recast as evidence that yes, He was listening, word for word, listening even while they slept without knowing it. But there's a third thing the blessed soul does, and it has to do with a specific day St. Thomas missed, a day that for him was a black hole in the calendar of his own apostolic life. A specific day in the year 33 that your loved one, on the other hand, did not miss. And stepping inside that day changes everything that follows. 8 days. 8 days is how long St. Thomas had to wait to see the risen Lord. 8 whole days while everyone else had already seen him. 8 days in which Thomas's inner calendar dragged forward like a stone, knowing he had missed the single most important event in the history of the world on the very afternoon it happened. Where was Thomas that Resurrection Sunday? The Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 24, states it with the bare-bones dryness of ancient texts that only record what's necessary. Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with the others when Jesus came. Full stop. No explanation. No justification. Not a single detail to help us understand why the apostle had stepped away from the group on the one day that mattered most. The church fathers have wrestled with this question for centuries. St. Augustine, in his homilies on John's Gospel, suggests Thomas had gone out to find food for the others, since he was the most practical one in the group and always handled the day-to-day tasks. Other fathers suggest Thomas had isolated himself in grief, shut away in some house far from the others, unable to bear their company after the crucifixion. The Syriac tradition pictures him walking alone on the Mount of Olives when it all happened. Any of the three works. What matters is that Thomas missed the first Easter, the real one, the one that happened when the doors were locked and Christ appeared, saying, "Peace be with you." And here is the third thing your loved one is doing in heaven. If your loved one died in grace, they received the full Easter without waiting 8 days, without waiting even a single second, without having to live through a week of doubt the way Thomas did. The Easter the apostle missed on that Sunday in the year 33 arrives for your loved one's soul the instant they cross the threshold of heaven, and it arrives in full. Saint Teresa of Jesus describes this exact moment of the soul in the book of her life, chapter 38. She describes it as a blazing encounter with the uncreated light of God, a light she herself witnessed in ecstasy during one of the favors the Lord granted her while she was at the convent of the Incarnation in Avila. And she says something important. In her own documented words, that light was of such a nature that the soul, upon seeing it, understood instantly that this was exactly what it had been searching for its whole life without knowing it. There was no need to pass through any explanation or any prior learning. The light itself taught the soul that beheld it, with no words, no intermediate images, no teacher standing between the soul and its source. This is what your loved one experiences as the third concrete thing happening in heaven, receiving all at once and forever the full Easter of the risen Christ. Stop and think about this. How many Easters did your loved ones spend on earth with their mind somewhere else entirely? How many Resurrection Sundays did they sit in Mass without really understanding why the liturgy kept talking about light overcoming darkness, death defeated, an empty tomb? How many years did they recite the creed without feeling anything concrete as the words left their mouth? How many times did they walk out of church on Easter Sunday exactly the way they walked in? Same worries, same bank balance, same ache in their right knee that flares up when it rains. All of that is behind them now. Your loved one is inside Easter itself. No screen standing between them and it. No liturgy explaining what's happening, because it's already happening within them. The resurrection of Christ is the reality they move through, the air they breathe, the very substance of their new existence. And here's something else Saint Teresa of Avila taught with real clarity. In the Seventh Mansions, chapter 2, Saint Teresa of Jesus says the soul fully united with God shares, in a real way, not a figure of speech, in the resurrection of Christ. The participation is ontological. In other words, what happens to the blessed soul is the same kind of thing that happened to Christ's body on that Sunday in the year 33. It's not simply receiving news of Easter. It's being inside Easter itself, part of it from within. That's why your loved one no longer grows old in heaven. That's why time no longer weighs on them the way it weighs on the rest of us down here. And everything we used to call exhaustion, pain, fear, loneliness simply has no room inside them anymore, because Christ's Easter fills every inch of who they are. I want to open something here that will close a little later. Why did St. Thomas have to wait 8 days? Why didn't Christ appear to him instantly, the way he later would to Saul on the road to Damascus? The answer has been kept by the spiritual tradition of the Church for centuries, and it ties directly to your own loved one. Thomas needed those 8 days for his heart to learn something specific that Christ wanted to teach him, something the risen Lord couldn't show him any other way. And that lesson, that 8-day journey, connects to something your loved one is living right now in heaven, something tied to a moment no priest has ever explained to you. The time Thomas said, "Let's go and die with him." That line comes from John 11:16. The apostle said it before Lazarus was even raised from the dead, believing he was walking straight into certain death alongside his master. And Christ, in heaven, has taught Thomas something about that line that changes the entire meaning of Christian death. Let's go there now. 6 months earlier, in a village near Jerusalem called Bethany, something happened that St. Thomas has never been able to forget. Lazarus, the brother of Martha and Mary, had fallen ill. The sisters sent word to Christ, who was on the other side of the Jordan at the time preaching. The message was brief. "Lord, the one you love is sick." Christ received the news, and instead of rushing to Bethany, stayed 2 more days where he was. When he finally decided to go, the apostles, alarmed, told him Bethany was dangerous territory. The temple authorities were hunting him, and going back there was basically turning himself in. And that's when St. Thomas, called Didymus, spoke up and said the line found in John chapter 11, verse 16. "Let us also go, that we may die with him. Let us also go, that we may die with him." Listen closely. That's the line of a man who's understood something. It's the line of someone who's no longer thinking about saving himself. It's the line of an apostle willing to follow his master straight into the trap, straight into certain death, straight to the blade, waiting for him at the end of that dusty road. It's a dark line, said with resignation, maybe through clenched teeth. But it's a line of absolute loyalty, all the way to the end. And in heaven, Christ has taught Thomas something about that line that completely reframes what the apostle thought he was saying that morning. What Thomas said that day with resignation, Christ has handed back to him with a complete reframing. What Thomas spoke as "let's go and die," the risen Lord has shown him in heaven actually meant "let's go and live." Because Christian death, according to the Lord's own direct teaching to his apostles after the resurrection, is the precise passage through which the soul enters true life. And this is the 4th concrete thing your loved one is doing in heaven. Right now, your loved one is understanding from the inside what on earth they only ever understood from the outside. They're grasping with every fiber of their glorified being that every time they used the word death in life, they had the wrong word. That every time they looked at a casket and thought, what a shame, what a sad ending, what emptiness, they were looking at a doorway in and mistaking it for an exit. They're discovering, with a clarity that on earth would have brought them to tears of joy, that every Christian death is a birth. And this is where St. Teresa of Jesus gives us one of the most beautiful things she ever wrote in her life. There's a short poem, very brief, that St. Teresa of Avila wrote later in her life, after many mystical favors, and left in her personal papers at the convent. The Church has preserved it, and it's still prayed in many Discalced Carmelite convents during morning prayers. The poem opens with a line that sounds almost like a riddle, and once you understand it, it becomes the highest spiritual confession imaginable. I live, yet no true life I know, and, living thus expectantly, I die because I do not die. Sit with every word, because every word of that line is exactly what your loved one is experiencing right now. I live, yet no true life I know. The blessed soul no longer rests on its own limited self. It lives, but its life comes from another, flows from another, is given to it continually by another, like a spring that draws its water from the source and not from itself. And, living thus expectantly. The soul in heaven still awaits the final resurrection of the body, the day it will be reunited with its glorified body at the end of time. It waits with a hope that no longer resembles hope as we know it on earth. It waits already knowing that what it's waiting for is guaranteed. I die because I do not die. Here's the heart of the line. Saint Teresa of Jesus was describing what it feels like for a soul in love with God to still be living in the body while already knowing the other shore. But the line also holds true, flipped completely around, fully realized in the soul of the blessed. Your loved one no longer dies because they've already passed through death and left it behind on the other side. Death no longer has any claim on them. The line that in Saint Teresa of Avila's mouth was a longing is, in your loved one's soul, a fulfilled reality. And here's where we close something we opened earlier. Remember, we were talking about the soul that doubted a great deal in life. The soul that went to confession 5 times and then stopped. The soul that said the rosary out of habit. The soul that stood in front of its own father's casket, wondering if anyone was on the other side listening. That soul in heaven is speaking Saint Teresa of Jesus' verse right now with their whole being. They're saying, I die because I do not die, with an inner smile they never learned how to smile on earth. And they're discovering, for the first time in their entire existence, that it was their doubt that's letting them love certainty with this much intensity now. What Thomas said as let's go and die with him, Christ has given back to him as let's go and live. What your loved one experienced as death, Christ is giving back to them as birth without end. And there are still 5 more things your loved one is doing right now in heaven. The next one has to do with a road, with a capital R, a road that St. Thomas himself once asked about, at a supper held in that same upper room on the Thursday night before the crucifixion. Let's go there right now, without waiting. What is a road? A road, in the simplest sense any plain farmer could grasp, is a worn strip of earth connecting 2 places. A route, a distance separating one point from another, covered only by putting one foot in front of the other for as long as it takes. We all understand that much. But there's another kind of road, one Christ himself, seated at the table in that upper room on the night of Holy Thursday in the year 33, identified with his own person. And the question that opened that conversation, the question that pulled from the Master the densest line in the 4th Gospel, was asked by none other than St. Thomas. They were eating supper, unleavened bread, roasted lamb, wine, 13 men reclining around a low table on cushions, as was customary at Passover meals of that time. And suddenly, Christ began talking about leaving, about a journey, about a place he was going to where he would prepare a room for them. The apostles listened, not quite understanding. The mood was tense. Gethsemane was only hours away. That's when St. Thomas, with that blunt directness so typical of him, spoke up and said, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? It's written in John chapter 14, verse 5. A human question, almost too human, a question any ordinary person today would ask sitting at that table. How am I supposed to walk a road I don't know, toward a place I've never been? And Christ answered with 6 words that have shaken theology for 2,000 years. I am the way and the truth and the life. John 14:6. Pause here. Because Christ's answer to Thomas is the 5th concrete thing your loved one is doing in heaven. On earth, your loved one walked many roads. Good roads, crooked ones. Roads that led them home at night, and roads that pulled them away from home during darker times. They walked city streets, highways, footpaths, shortcuts. They knew the dust of small towns and the pavement of big cities. But no road on earth, no matter how long, ever led them directly to God. No earthly road is God himself. The roads down here are means to an end. The road of heaven is a person. It's Christ. It's the body of the risen Lord that Thomas touched with his own fingers. And that's exactly what your loved one is walking now. Your loved one, in grace, now walks within the road that is Christ. Their step is Christ, their direction is Christ. The distance they cover, whether tiny or infinite, is also Christ. There's no separation between the one walking and the road itself. It's the exact image Saint Teresa of Jesus used in the interior castle, first mentioned chapter 2, when she described the soul as a crystal castle, where the center and the path toward the center are one and the same reality. The blessed soul lives inside that traveled unity. And here's something beautiful worth taking slowly. Saint Teresa of Avila, in The Way of Perfection, chapter 28, wrote that a soul who has reached union with God no longer walks toward God from the outside. It walks within him. She tells it in her own documented words, comparing it to a small child asleep in his mother's arms while she carries him down a street. The child is moving, yes, but he's no longer tired because someone else is carrying him. Every step is taken by the mother on his behalf. Every yard of ground is gained by the sleeping child without any effort of his own. This is how your loved one walks in heaven. No exhaustion, no having to choose between two paths. None of the weight of doubt that on earth used to accompany every major decision. Christ himself is the road being walked, and every step taken happens within the risen one. This completely reshapes the picture many Catholics carry around in their heads about heaven. Some imagine heaven as a static garden, a golden waiting room, a place where souls just sit in soft light, passing eternal time. That picture falls short. Heaven is movement. It's a journey. It's continuous forward motion within Christ, a progression that never stops, because God is infinite and the blessed soul discovers every single instant a new depth of the same God it already knows. Your loved one, right now, is walking. They're moving deeper into Christ, discovering dimensions of God they couldn't even have imagined on earth. And every step leads them not to repetition, but to fresh wonder. This is an idea the Eastern Church Fathers called epectasis. The word comes from Greek and means stretching forward, reaching ahead. St. Gregory of Nyssa in the 4th century wrote that the blessed soul stretches toward God eternally without ever exhausting him. It's the same idea St. Teresa of Jesus expressed through the image of the interior castle. Even once the soul has reached the 7th mansion, it goes on discovering new things about God forever. Your loved one is inside that movement right now, eternally open to more. And here's something I want to open now that will close in the next part. When St. Thomas asked that question at the supper, he wasn't alone. 11 other apostles were there with him. And in heaven, your loved one doesn't walk the road that is Christ in total solitude either. They walk surrounded by others. And they recognize some of them. They recognize family members already glorified, saints they prayed to on earth, their own guardian angel. There's a very specific gospel scene where St. Thomas appears right at the edge of a lake, looking out over the water at dawn, watching others recognize the risen Lord before he does himself. That scene has a lot to do with what comes next. Dawn breaks over the Sea of Tiberias. A thin mist rises off the water. The sky still holds the blues of night, but it's starting to blush a pale pink to the east, toward the hills of Galilee. A small old boat, its wood worn from years of fishing, floats about 100 yards from shore. 7 men are inside. They've spent the whole night casting their nets and caught nothing. Their arms ache, their backs are cold, their spirits low. These are the fishermen who went back to their old trade after the crucifixion, not knowing what else to do with their lives now that the Master had died and risen. The Gospel of John, chapter 21, verse 2, gives us the exact names. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. Thomas is there, watching the water tired." And suddenly from the shore, a voice calls out, "Friends, haven't you caught anything?" The voice comes from a man they can barely make out through the mist. They answer no, that the night's fishing was a complete failure. And the man tells them, "Throw the net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some." They do. The net fills up with fish. 153 large fish, the gospel says, with almost surgical precision. And then comes the moment that matters for what we're looking at today. John, the beloved disciple, looks toward the shore and recognizes him first. "It is the Lord," he whispers to Peter. And Peter, who'd stripped down to work, wraps his cloak around himself and jumps into the water to get there first. Thomas, meanwhile, stays in the boat with the others. He's one of the ones still watching, seeing John recognize before he does, watching the whole scene unfold around someone else's recognition. Thomas recognizes him too, just a little later than the others. And that's exactly what matters here, because this scene is the most concrete gospel image of the sixth thing your loved one is doing in heaven. Your loved one at this very moment is recognizing, and that's worth unpacking slowly. On earth, your loved one knew a lot of people. Parents, siblings, children, cousins, neighbors, co-workers, people from the neighborhood. Some of those people died before they did. Others died after. Some are still alive, and you're one of them. And the question ordinary people always ask, standing by a grave or looking at an old photograph, is this: do souls meet each other again in heaven? Do they recognize one another? Catholic doctrine, and Saint Teresa of Jesus explicitly, answers yes. Saint Teresa of Avila describes this with striking clarity in the book of her life, chapter 39. During one of her mystical favors, she had a vision in which the Lord showed her several blessed souls already in heaven, and she, in her own documented words, recognized them one by one. Her father, Don Alonso, who had died years earlier. Some of the sisters from the first foundation who had already passed away. Physical appearance mattered very little in that vision. Glorified souls keep their personal identity, their history, their unique way of being loved by God, and it was by that radiance that she recognized them instantly. This is what your loved one is doing right now. They recognize your grandmother if she died before them. They recognize the brother who passed away 20 years ago. They recognize the co-worker they used to grab coffee with every Monday, who had a heart attack one Sunday in March. They recognize their own father if he was already there, and they recognize them with a clarity that was impossible on earth, because here we recognize faces. There, whole souls recognize each other. And there's something even more beautiful still. Your loved one also recognizes the saints they prayed to on earth, the ones on the holy cards tucked inside their missal, the ones they remembered in their rosaries, their own guardian angel who walked beside them their entire life on earth without ever being seen, and who now stands next to them with a real specific face. They recognize them instantly, the way you'd recognize a dearly loved relative after many years apart. Picture that moment. Your loved one is walking within the road that is Christ, and suddenly they turn, and to their left there's a being of light, smiling that exact smile they always sensed but never actually saw. Their guardian angel. The one who woke them up that one early morning back in 1972 when there was a small fire in the kitchen. The one who whispered in their ear not to take that shady deal. The one who held their heart together the day they buried their mother. They recognize them, and they understand for the first time just how many times they were protected without ever knowing it. And here's something important from earlier that closes now. When Thomas recognized Christ on the shore of Tiberias, he did it a little later than the others. He wasn't first. But his recognition was different. It carried the weight of the upper room, the wound in the side, the 8 days of waiting. He recognized with his whole body. And because of that, his recognition counted for more, even though it came later. If your loved one was someone who came to recognize things late in life, they're recognizing right now with that same strength St. Thomas showed that morning at Tiberias. And while they're recognizing, they're starting to do something more, something that involves you directly, something no priest has ever told you, because it's written in ancient texts about St. Thomas's mission in India, in a city called Mylapore. Let's go there now. Mylapore, on the southeastern coast of India. The year 72 AD. A port city full of Arab merchants, Malabar traders, and Jews of the diaspora. Dusty streets, the smell of spices. The Indian Ocean pulsing just a few feet from the last house along the harbor. And on a hill just south of the city, an old man kneels in prayer beneath a tree. His beard is long, nearly white. His robe, white once in another life, is now gray with road dust. He speaks Aramaic, his mother tongue, but he's also picked up some of the local language to preach to the fishermen and the Brahmins who, over the past 17 years, have been turning to faith in the risen Lord. That man is St. Thomas, and he's praying because he knows the local king's soldiers are looking for him. 40 years earlier in that upper room in Jerusalem, he had touched the risen Lord's side and said, "My Lord and my God," and he hadn't sat still since. He'd evangelized Edessa first, in Mesopotamia. Then, according to the tradition recorded by the Syriac Church Fathers and by Eusebius of Caesarea in his Ecclesiastical History, Book 3, Chapter 1, India became his apostolic territory. And there he was, near the end of the road, on a hill by the sea. The king's soldiers arrive. They find him kneeling. They run a spear through his side. Thomas dies with the exact same wound he had touched on Christ 40 years before. Pause here for a moment. Because what I just told you doesn't end with the apostle's death. Thomas's apostolic mission didn't stop when he was buried in Mylapore in the year 72. The mission continued, and it's still continuing today in the very year you're hearing this. And that continuation of his apostolic mission from heaven is exactly the seventh concrete thing your blessed loved one is doing. Your loved one right now is actively interceding for you. This is a truth of Catholic faith that many devout Catholics know, but few fully understand. The communion of saints means that the blessed in heaven continue acting on behalf of those of us still on pilgrimage here on earth. They do this through intercession, which theologically means far more than simply asking God on our behalf. It means actively participating in the outpouring of divine grace over our specific individual lives. Saint Teresa of Jesus put this into a striking image. In The Way of Perfection, chapter 31, Saint Teresa of Avila wrote, in her own documented words, that the saints already in heaven don't just rest, gazing at God from some eternal balcony. They work. That's her word. They work for the souls of the people they left behind on earth. According to Saint Teresa of Jesus' direct teaching, the prayer of the blessed is more effective than 1,000 rosaries said down here, because it comes straight from the center of union with God. It's a prayer that's already inside God's own heart the moment it's spoken. Think about what that means for you, specifically. Your loved one, if they died in grace, is right now working for you from heaven. Working is the word Saint Teresa of Avila used, and working means their blessed existence has an active dimension toward the people they left behind. They're not in some passive, contemplative waiting state. They are in a contemplation that turns instantly and without losing any of its force into intercession for you. When you pray for them, they're praying for you at the same time, and their prayer is stronger than yours because it comes from the other shore. This changes your entire relationship with your loved one. Some devout Catholics live their grief as though the relationship with the deceased simply ended, leaving only memory behind. That picture is incomplete. The relationship continues, just in a different form, moving in a different direction, with different rules. Your loved one, if they're in glory, knows you now more intimately than when they lived under the same roof with you. They know you because they see you inside Christ, inside the road they now walk from within. And from that position, they intercede. There's a beautiful episode from Saint Teresa of Jesus worth recalling here. She herself wrote in the book of her life, chapter 38, that long after her father, Don Alonso Sanchez de Cepeda, had died, she had felt him close to her in prayer several times and had sensed clearly that her father was interceding for her from heaven. She tells it as a fact of her spiritual experience, without drama, without exaggeration, the way someone describes something perfectly natural within the supernatural order of grace. Your loved one is doing exactly that for you right now. And here's the important question. How does that intercession actually show up? How do you notice from down here that your loved one is working for you from heaven? You notice it in small things, a difficult decision that suddenly becomes clear when you felt completely lost, a chance encounter with someone who says exactly the words you needed to hear that week, an unexpected sense of inner peace in the middle of a dark day for no apparent reason, as if someone had placed a hand on your shoulder from somewhere you couldn't see, a concrete physical protection, an accident avoided by seconds, a phone call that comes at exactly the right moment. Those aren't coincidences. That's your loved one's hand at work in heaven on your behalf. And there's one more, even higher act of the blessed soul. Act number 8, the one that closes everything we've covered on this journey together. It's the one act no priest has ever preached to you from the pulpit, because it has to do with the glorified body St. Thomas touched, and with a day that hasn't arrived yet, but is guaranteed. Let's go to that final step. Close your eyes for a moment. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath and try to picture the scene I'm about to describe, because it's the final thing your loved one is doing in heaven. The 8th, the one that closes everything we've shared together in these last few minutes. And it's the hardest one to believe, even though it's the most certain of them all. Your loved one is waiting. They're waiting for the day they get a body back. Not just any body, a glorified body, like the risen Christ's, the one St. Thomas put his hand inside that afternoon in the upper room. And above all, they're waiting for the first embrace they're going to give you when you see each other face to face again. What I just said is crystal clear Catholic doctrine, defined by the Church since its earliest centuries. We confess it every Sunday at Mass when we pray the Creed. I believe in the resurrection of the body. The final resurrection will really happen with true, tangible bodies. Nothing figurative or symbolic about it. At the end of time, when Christ returns in glory, every person who has died will rise again with their own bodies, now glorified, free from illness, free from aging, free from the ordinary laws of matter. And your loved one's soul, currently in heaven, will be reunited with their body, the same body. The body you kissed on the forehead that last time, the body you held in your arms so many times before saying goodbye, only transformed, like Christ's. St. Paul explained this in his first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 42. What is sown is perishable, what is raised is imperishable. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. And spiritual here doesn't mean ghostly. It means a body fully claimed and governed by the Spirit, the way Christ's body was after the resurrection, the body St. Thomas touched with his own fingers in that upper room. St. Teresa of Jesus spoke about this waiting in the Seventh Mansions, chapter 4. St. Teresa of Avila writes, in her own documented words, that the blessed soul lives a kind of double relationship with time. On one hand, it is already completely satisfied in the beatific vision. On the other hand, it still awaits something yet to come. The day the whole of creation will be made new and the body will be reunited with the soul. According to St. Teresa of Jesus, that waiting feels like joyful anticipation, nothing like the anxiety we know down here. Like someone who knows the celebration they are already enjoying still has one final act ahead. one that will be higher than everything that came before it. Your loved one is living that anticipation right now. And inside that waiting, there's something specific that involves you directly. Your loved one is preparing right now the first embrace they're going to give you when you arrive. They're preparing it with everything they have, with all the glorified intelligence they now possess, with all the love that union with God has made infinitely deeper, with all the knowledge of your life's story they already hold from heaven. They're thinking of you. And the exact moment you cross that threshold, they'll be there, waiting to welcome you. Stop for a moment. Because what I'm about to say is the most important thing you'll hear today. Your loved one is not far away. They're not floating in some distant light, indifferent to what's happening with you. They are waiting for you, specifically. And when the day comes, theirs will be one of the very first faces you see. They'll welcome you with the same love they had for you on earth, only infinitely more intense. They'll hold you. And in that embrace, you'll suddenly understand everything you can't make sense of right now. You'll understand why they died when they did. You'll understand why you were the one left behind. You'll understand every tear you've cried for them. Every night you couldn't sleep. Every time you looked at their empty chair in the kitchen and felt your chest tighten. All of that, in that single instant, will finally make complete sense. And now I want to close something we opened at the very beginning of this video. Remember the question I asked you at the start? What was your loved one doing right now in heaven while you were reading this, while you were breathing, while the clock kept ticking? You have the full answer now. Your loved one is touching the side of Christ. They're confessing my Lord and my God with their entire being. They're receiving the Easter that St. Thomas missed for 8 days. They're understanding that let's go and die actually meant let's go and live. They're walking within the road that is Christ. They're recognizing their own, their saints, their guardian angel. They're actively interceding for you, working from heaven for your specific life. And they're waiting with joyful anticipation for the day you'll see each other face to face again so they can hold you. 8 things. All 8 happening right now in your blessed loved one's soul. At this exact hour while you're listening to this. Saint Teresa of Jesus, on one of the most beautiful pages she ever wrote, in the book of her life, chapter 40, left us a line worth keeping close. She said, in her own documented words, that a soul who has reached union with God has only one task left to complete. Waiting for the day the body is reunited with it so that it can praise God in full, with its voice, with its hands, with its feet, with the eyes that will see him again, and with the mouth that will once more call him my Lord and my God. That day will come for you too. And on that day, your loved one will be one of the first to hold you. Before July 3rd, the liturgical feast of St. Thomas the Apostle, entrust your loved one's soul to him. Ask him to be the specific saint who guards this hope of yours until your very last day. And watch how everything falls into place inside you. Stay here a moment longer before you move from wherever you are right now. What you just received today is worth far more than weeks of quiet, lonely grief. You've discovered something most devout Catholics spend years living without ever seeing this clearly. You've understood, with the calm of someone who already holds the answer in their hands, where your loved one is, what they're doing right now, how they love you from the other shore, and why their death was actually the beginning of something you too will one day enjoy. You've watched St. Thomas put his hand into the side of the risen Lord. You've heard the 4 most powerful words in all of Christianity, the same ones your own loved one is speaking right now with everything they are. You've walked the shore of the Sea of Tiberias at dawn. You've followed the apostle all the way to a hill in Millipore, where 40 years after touching Christ's wound, he received his own. And you've understood, perhaps for the first time in your adult life, that the communion of saints isn't a theological phrase repeated without thinking. It's a concrete reality that touches you personally. That's worth something. It's worth a great deal. Because what you're carrying inside you now that quiet certainty about where your loved one is and what they're doing with their glorified existence, isn't going anywhere. It's going to stay with you like a small, steady light lit every time you think of them. And it matters especially because it's reaching you before July 3rd, before the liturgical feast of St. Thomas the Apostle. You still have time to entrust your loved one's soul to him, to write their name in the comments if you haven't already, to prepare that small inner gesture that, on the 3rd, will turn your morning prayer into a concrete apostolic intercession. But there's something more, and that's why I'm asking you not to leave just yet. What you just heard is only one of the doors St. Teresa of Avila left open for Catholics today. She wrote, in her own documented words, that the saints in heaven and the saints of the Church still here on earth are joined by invisible threads, barely noticeable from down here, and that every time someone understands one of those threads, a door opens to understand another. Pulling one thread leads to the next. What you've just understood about your loved one is preparing you to understand something even greater, and that something is within your reach right now, at this very moment. Take a second to think about what's happened inside you since you started listening to this. You've thought of your loved one, yes, but you've thought of them differently this time, not with that gray, heavy nostalgia that wakes you up at 4 a.m. during a storm, with a quiet kind of joy, with a living image in your mind, with an almost physical desire to keep learning more about the life of heaven and about everything Saint Teresa of Jesus left written about it. And that desire you're feeling in your chest right now has a specific name in Catholic tradition. It's called spiritual thirst. Saint Teresa of Avila described it in The Way of Perfection, chapter 19, with an image she had lived herself over years of interior life. She compared it to the physical thirst of a pilgrim crossing a dry desert, searching for a well, never stopping, never resting. But with one crucial difference. Physical thirst is satisfied by a glass of water, and then it's gone. Spiritual thirst is satisfied, and in being satisfied, it grows. Every answer the soul receives opens up the next question. Every thread it pulls reveals the next one, waiting right beside it, hoping to be pulled too. That thirst has just woken up in you. And that means that right now, at this exact moment, there's something more waiting to satisfy it. Your loved one doesn't want you to switch this off and go back to your day without taking the next step. Your loved one from heaven is gently pushing you to keep walking the path you've just discovered this afternoon. Because they know, better than you do, that faith is built by linking one understanding to the next without ever losing the thread. And they also know the time to continue is right now, while the light you've just received is still warm in your chest. If you let the hours go by, that light cools off. That's just how it works. Tomorrow morning, once you're up and dealing with groceries, phone calls, dinner, that light will still be alive, but further away. The day after, even further. A week from now, it'll just be a fond memory of something you heard once. And the thirst will have gone back to sleep, with the water sitting right there, an arm's length away, untouched. So I'm asking you for one very specific thing. Before you move, before you close anything, before you go on to whatever else is next in your day, take the next step. Right after this voice you're listening to, you're going to find another door, already open. It's going to appear right there in front of you. I promise you that. And that door is exactly the one St. Teresa of Avila would have wanted you to walk through, immediately after the one you just walked through with me. Because spiritual doors work that way. One leads to the next. What you now understand about what your loved one is doing in heaven is preparing you for an even higher understanding. One about what you yourself can do right now, from down here, to lift the souls of your departed loved ones to an even greater degree of glory than they already have. And that understanding is waiting for you right on the other side of the door you're about to see. Saint Teresa of Jesus put it into an image worth repeating before you cross over. She said, in her own documented words in the interior castle, that the human soul is like a garden, and a garden, watered just once, gives some fruit, yes, but small and scattered. A garden watered twice in a row starts giving fruit of a different size altogether. And a garden watered continuously, session after session, ends up producing fruit the gardener himself never even imagined at the start. Your soul just received a generous watering this afternoon. You felt it. You felt the dry dust sitting on top of certain old certainties start to clear away under the water of St. Teresa of Jesus' teaching. And now your inner garden is asking for a second watering. It's asking with that quiet hunger only people who've tasted something truly good can recognize. Give it to yourself. It's not hard. You don't have to do anything complicated. Just let the next door open in front of you, without resisting it, without checking the clock, without thinking about what you were supposed to do next. Your loved one understands this from heaven. Your loved one sees, from the other shore, that every minute you spend now going deeper into St. Teresa of Avila's teaching becomes grace poured directly onto their own soul. Every step you take in this direction is a step they take further into Christ. And that's something no other gesture can give them today. Walk through the next door now. Do it slowly, no rushing, like someone stepping into the next chapel of an old sanctuary in the heart of Castile and lingering there a while longer, sitting on the wooden bench, listening to the silence that settles after the incense fades. The next answer is waiting for you there, and the next thirst, and the next joy heaven had set aside for you. And before you go, let me say one more thing. Thank you for being here with me these last 2 hours. Thank you for giving your loved one some of your time. Thank you for writing their name in the comments, if you did, and for giving them this slice of your afternoon. Time so many others would have given instead to their phone, the TV, things they won't even remember tomorrow. St. Teresa of Avila wrote in the book of her life, chapter 8, a small luminous line worth keeping close when it's time to rest. She said, in her own documented words, that peace of soul is the greatest gift God gives to those who remember their dead with real love. That peace is given to you now, at this exact moment, as we bring this conversation to a close. Receive it. May St. Thomas the Apostle, who touched the side of the risen Lord with his own finger in that upper room, locked from within, place his apostolic hand on the head of your loved one's soul and hold it there, steady, until the 3rd of July arrives. May St. Teresa of Jesus intercede for you from the Carmel of Avila in heaven. May the Virgin Mary cover your home with her blue mantle tonight while you sleep. May your departed loved one's guardian angel greet yours in the air, like two old friends recognizing each other after a long time apart. And may the peace of the risen Lord, the same peace Christ left in that upper room when he walked through locked doors on the afternoon of Easter, rest on you and on those you love until we meet again. Take care, friend. God bless you.